Gemini, God wants you to visit a new place. It will be the greatest gift of your life. Pause for a moment. Close your eyes just for a breath and ask yourself, what if the life you were meant to live is waiting for you somewhere else? Not just metaphorically, but in a very real, sacred place. A city, a home, a space filled with purpose, designed not just for your comfort, but for your calling. Lately, have you felt a quiet unrest, like your current surroundings are starting to blur around the edges? That's not escapism. That's alignment whispering your name. A divine invitation is calling you forward, not to run, but to rise. The place where you are now may have served you, but it is no longer serving you. There's no shame in outgrowing a space, a lifestyle, or even an identity. Gemini, your soul is ready for more. Not more noise, not more chaos, but more truth. A place where your mind breathes clearer, your intuition rings louder, and your gifts, those sacred, magnetic Gemini gifts, begin to bloom like never before. God is preparing something for you. Something real, something grounded, and something utterly transformative. So if this message stirs something ancient inside you, a sense of longing you've carried since childhood, don't ignore it. Stay with me. We're about to uncover not just a move of geography, but a movement of destiny. And if you feel a shift even now, like a breath you've been holding finally being released, then you already know this message is for you. Like, share, and subscribe, not for my sake, but so you don't miss the next divine breadcrumb on this path. Let's begin. Gate 1. A change of place, a change of everything. Gemini, for someone who lives so naturally in the realm of ideas, movement isn't new to you. You are, by nature, a wanderer of thought, a seeker of insight, a traveler of nuance. But this time, the movement that is being asked of you isn't just intellectual. It's not about a new perspective, a book, or a conversation. It's about relocation, a real, tangible shift. God isn't just adjusting your mindset, He's changing your landscape. And this change, it's holy. For weeks now, maybe even years, you've been feeling a growing dissonance between who you are becoming and where you are currently rooted. There's nothing necessarily wrong with your life, but something feels incomplete. The air feels stale, the rhythm's predictable, and beneath the busyness, there is an aching silence whispering, there is more. There is somewhere else you need to be. You've been brushing it off as restlessness, escapism, even boredom. But what if it's not dissatisfaction at all? What if it's divine direction? Somewhere in this world, there is a place prepared for you. Not a dreamland, not a fantasy, an actual place. A home, a city, a stretch of coastline, a cabin in the woods, a street corner buzzing with life. Somewhere that has been spiritually coded for your emergence. It's not about glamour or opportunity in the way the world defines it. It's about alignment. The energy of that place will match the energy of your soul's next season. When you get there, things won't just change externally. You will change. You'll begin to remember who you really are and who you've been suppressing just to survive where you are. You see, Gemini, your adaptability is your gift, but it can also become your cage. You know how to blend in, how to keep things light, how to talk about everything except the heaviness you carry. And sometimes, you convince yourself you're fine just because you're functional. But Spirit doesn't want you to function. Spirit wants you to flourish. And so, this is not a gentle suggestion. It's a sacred instruction. You are being called to a new place because your purpose requires a new context. You can't plant a redwood tree in a flower pot. And you can't fulfill your divine assignment in an environment that only supports half of who you are. There is soil somewhere else that is rich with the nutrients of your next becoming. There are people waiting to hear your voice, not just your words. There are opportunities that won't make sense until your feet touch that ground. There are synchronicities, moments of radical favor, that can only unlock once you're where you're meant to be. Think of the stories that stir your soul. The prophets, the poets, the saints. They didn't awaken in comfort. Their lives were never fully born until they said yes to the call to move, to leave their old land and walk toward the unknown. Abraham, Moses, Rumi, Teresa, So many of them found their purpose after they left everything familiar behind. You may be asking, how will I know where to go? Gemini, that's the dance, isn't it? You're not given coordinates. You're given clues. And you, of all signs, are the best at recognizing them when you slow down long enough to listen. Pay attention to the places that keep appearing in conversation. A city name you keep hearing in podcasts. A place that shows up in dreams. A region you've never visited but can't stop thinking about. That odd pull in your belly when you see a photograph. That warm vibration in your chest when someone mentions a town. These are not random. They are divine breadcrumbs. And don't be surprised if the place you're called to doesn't make sense on paper. God isn't limited to logic. The place might be smaller, quieter, even less outwardly successful than your current location. But the fruit of your life will multiply in ways your ego never saw coming. You'll breathe deeper. You'll sleep better. Conversations will feel richer. Ideas will come easier. The right collaborators will emerge from seemingly nowhere. And perhaps most importantly, you'll stop feeling like you have to perform your joy because you'll actually be living it. There's an ancient wisdom that says, the place you're in determines the voice you hear. If you've felt spiritually muted lately, if prayers feel like echoes, if inspiration seems dry, consider that it's not your faith that's broken. It might just be your location. A shift in geography can open the heavens in ways that therapy, books, or even community sometimes cannot. Because location is not just about physical space. It's about resonance. You're meant to resonate somewhere new. And I know what your mind may be doing right now. It's collecting reasons why this message is impractical, why you should stay, why you're being foolish to entertain such ideas. That's okay. The mind does that. It protects what it knows. But the soul is already packing. So let me ask you gently but clearly, if nothing changes, what part of you will be left behind? If you stay, what part of you will slowly go silent? If you listen to fear, what miracle might you miss? Gemini, this is not about running away from your life. It's about finally running toward it. And the greatest gift God will ever give you is not comfort, it's alignment. The kind that rearranges everything. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that feels like home. Not because it's familiar, but because it's finally true. Gate 2, the courage to leave what once felt like home. There is a sacred sorrow in letting go of what once made you feel safe. And Gemini, I know that your heart, though often shielded behind wit and adaptability, has felt this weight before. You are not new to change. You've pivoted before. You've walked away before. But this time feels different. This time, it's not just about leaving a situation. It's about leaving an identity, a rhythm, a version of you that was shaped by a place you've outgrown. And yet, that place once held you. It once cradled your becoming. It was the backdrop for joy, for pain, for memories that still leave echoes in your mind. Maybe it's the town you arrived in during a season of survival. Maybe it's the job that once made you feel powerful, or the community that once felt like belonging. Maybe it's a relationship, a house, a way of moving through the world. It was once a lifeboat, and now it feels like a cage. That realization, Gemini, doesn't come gently. It shakes something loose. Because leaving home isn't just a logistical decision. It's an emotional reckoning. You find yourself standing in the same places, but feeling like a stranger. You smile at the same people, but wonder why the warmth feels forced. You go through the motions, but deep inside, your soul whispers, you've already left in spirit. Now it's time for your body to catch up. But then the grief creeps in. Yes, even when you know it's time. Even when you know the alignment is calling. Because you are not abandoning what you've built. You are honoring what it taught you. And still, the ache is real. The in-between is real. The confusion, the guilt, the nostalgia, they all surface like ghosts asking for one last glance before they fade. You may find yourself second-guessing. You may start to romanticize what you're leaving behind, remembering only the good. That's okay. Memory is kind like that. But don't let kindness distort truth. What once held you is now holding you back. What once taught you is now silencing your next lesson. The season has shifted, and pretending you can bloom in winter soil will only leave you tired, frustrated, and half alive. Gemini, you are not meant to stay in places where your soul keeps shrinking to fit in. You are not meant to explain your evolution to those committed to misunderstanding it. You do not need to apologize for outgrowing people, roles, or routines that no longer reflect the truth of who you are. This isn't betrayal. This is becoming. Leaving does not mean you're ungrateful. It means you've listened deeply, and you're brave enough to respond. The chapter you're closing wasn't a mistake. It was sacred. But so is the one you haven't written yet. And to write it, you need to step into a new environment. One that doesn't require you to hide your hunger for more. You may feel guilty for disappointing others, for choosing yourself, for not staying where you were expected to stay. But let me ask you, Gemini, who pays the cost when you don't choose you? Who carries the weight of a life that feels misaligned just so others can stay comfortable? The courage to leave is not a rejection of your past. It's a declaration of your future. It's saying, I bless what has been, but I will no longer betray myself to preserve it. Let me offer you a story. There was a woman named Marin, a Gemini in her early 50s, who had lived in the same city her entire life. She had a good job, a loving family, a community that respected her. But for years, she felt something tugging inside, like a thread being pulled by invisible hands. She ignored it at first, buried it in productivity, but eventually, the restlessness turned into illness. Her body began to ache. Her joy dimmed. One night, she dreamed of a cottage in a forest she'd never visited. She woke up in tears. A week later, a friend sent her a photo of the exact cottage from the dream. It was real, for sale, hundreds of miles away, in a place she'd never been. Her heart knew before her mind could catch up. Marin sold her house. She left everything and moved. Now, she spends her mornings in quiet woods, writing poetry she never knew she had inside her. Her health has returned. She hosts retreats. She laughs like a woman reborn. And she says, I thought I was losing everything. I didn't know I was just finally choosing myself. This is what's possible when you honor the holy discomfort that comes with divine change. This is what unfolds when you stop editing your life to please a chapter that has already ended. So, Gemini, what are you still holding on to out of habit rather than love? What story are you still telling yourself to justify your hesitation? What comfort are you clinging to, even though it costs you your clarity? It's okay to cry. It's okay to say goodbye in whispers. But don't stay rooted in a place your soul has already outgrown. God is not asking you to be reckless. He's asking you to be obedient to the pull inside your own chest. He's not promising ease. He's promising truth. And truth, dear one, is always worth it. Leaving is not the end. It's the opening. You're not running away. You're rising up. You're not abandoning your life. You're answering it. You're not leaving home. You're finally heading toward it. Gate 3. The soul connection awaits you there. Gemini, if you only knew what, or who, was waiting for you in the place God is calling you toward, you would not delay another day. You would stop questioning, stop overanalyzing, stop trying to understand every piece of the journey before you take the first step. Because the kind of love and connection that is waiting for you, it doesn't live in your current coordinates. It lives in the next chapter. You see, not all soulmates are meant to be found in familiar places. Sometimes, the most sacred connections are hidden in places that require a leap of faith to reach. And you, Gemini, with all your charm, intelligence, and emotional curiosity, you have already outgrown the old patterns of superficial companionship. Your soul is yearning for something deeper now. A conversation that doesn't just engage your mind, but nourishes your spirit. A presence that doesn't just excite you, but awakens you. This isn't about romance alone. This is about soul family. People whose energy will feel like home even if their face is unfamiliar. Someone who, upon first meeting, you'll recognize not with your eyes, but with your soul. That quiet voice inside will say, there you are. I've been waiting. In the new place, those connections are possible because the energy of that location is aligned with your next level. The The people assigned to walk with you on that path, they're not staying in your past. They are already positioned at the destination God is guiding you toward. Let me tell you about Elias, a Gemini in his late 30s. For most of his adult life, Elias lived in a bustling city where he had plenty of friends, constant activity, and a steady career. Yet, year after year, he felt empty in his relationships, like he was always pouring into others but rarely felt seen or understood in return. He didn't know how to name it, but the truth was clear. He was surrounded by people who liked the idea of him, but not the depth of him. One day, after a spontaneous trip to a coastal town for a business conference, Elias found himself in a small art gallery talking to a local woman named Rosalind. They spoke for hours about books, about spirituality, about childhood dreams and soul purpose. They had never met before, and yet by the end of the conversation, it felt as if their hearts had been speaking in a secret language since lifetimes ago. They weren't romantically involved, but their meeting changed Elias forever. That town, those people, that frequency, it felt like a world his soul had always known, but his body had just discovered. Within 6 months, he had made the bold decision to relocate there. And since then, his life has bloomed in ways he never imagined. He met 2 other spiritual teachers who became his lifelong collaborators. He opened a healing space that now helps dozens every week. And most importantly, he said, for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I have to explain who I am. I can just be. Gemini, don't underestimate the power of the right people in the right place. It's not that you've been hard to love. It's that you've been living in a place that isn't energetically tuned to receive who you are. God has already prepared those aligned souls for you. They may not know your name yet. They may be praying for something without realizing it's you they're waiting for. But once you arrive, when your energy enters the room, things will shift. Doors will open. Souls will remember. And conversations will flow that feel like music written just for you. You may also find healing in relationships you didn't expect. People who carry pieces of your story in ways you never thought possible. A barista who shares the same childhood wound. A neighbor who becomes like a parent. A child whose joy revives your own inner child. These are the connections that make life holy. These are the reminders that God doesn't just assign us to purpose, He assigns us to people. And for those of you who have been longing for love in its deepest, most sacred form, yes, even that may be waiting for you there. Not the kind of love that plays games or dims your light, but a love that feels like recognition. A love that says, I see every part of you and I honor it. A love that meets you where you are and walks with you toward who you are becoming. But here's the truth, Gemini. These soul-level relationships will not find you while you're pretending to be someone you're not in a place you've outgrown. You have to take the risk of walking away from the lukewarm to step into the sacred. It takes courage to leave comfort for destiny. It takes faith to believe that someone you haven't met yet could love you more deeply than those who've known you for years. It takes inner strength to accept that the version of you who is loved fully only exists in the place where you are aligned fully. But you're ready. I feel it. You've outgrown shallow waters. You crave the depth now. You are no longer entertained by conversations that go nowhere or relationships that stay surface level. Your spirit is calling in its match, spiritually, emotionally, energetically. That's why the people around you may feel increasingly distant. That's why old friendships feel like echoes. It's not failure. It's prophecy. You are being drawn by design. So take heart. Your tribe is waiting. The soul recognition you've longed for, the sacred mirror who reflects your brilliance and your brokenness with grace, is already in motion. The city is already vibrating at your frequency. The house already exists. The seat at the table has already been set. All that's left is for you to arrive. Gate 4, the transformation only this place can bring. Gemini, you were never meant to stay the same. You were born under a sign of movement, duality, curiosity, and metamorphosis. And yet, there is a difference between constant motion and true transformation. One distracts, the other liberates. And what the divine is preparing for you now is not another season of distraction. It is a sacred, irreversible rebirth. The place you are being called to, it isn't just about where you'll live. It's about who you will become once you are finally aligned with your truest environment. This place carries the frequency that your soul has been waiting for. And once you arrive, something ancient inside you will awaken. Something you've only glimpsed in dreams. Something that has been silenced too long by noise, fear, and the burden of adaptation. Because, Gemini, let's be honest, you've spent years adapting. You've become a master at shifting shape to survive. You've played every role, worn every mask, smiled through confusion, spoken through silence. And while the world has praised your versatility, only you know the exhaustion of never quite being seen in your wholeness. That's why this new place matters so much. Because it's not asking you to be anyone else. It's inviting you to finally become you. Think of this place as sacred soil, already tilled and blessed by heaven itself. Every footstep you take on it won't just feel physical. It will feel spiritual, like entering a temple, like walking into a memory your soul made before you were born. The air will taste different. Time will feel slower. Your body will rest deeper. Your mind will speak quieter. And your heart, your beautiful, overstimulated, overthinking Gemini heart, will finally be still enough to listen. Not long ago, I spoke with a woman named Camille, a Gemini in her early 40s who had spent most of her life chasing success in a high-rise city. She had accolades, wealth, visibility, but she felt numb. She couldn't sleep. She kept dreaming of rivers. Always rivers. Wide ones. Flowing ones. Alive ones. She didn't understand why, until one day she was scrolling online and saw a listing for a riverside retreat cabin in Oregon. Without thinking, she booked a trip. 2 weeks. That was all. On her second morning there, Camille sat by the riverbank and wept, not from pain, but from recognition. She said, "I didn't know my nervous system had been screaming for silence. I didn't know how far away I'd drifted from myself." Within months, she resigned, sold her apartment, moved to that town. And the woman she became there? She started painting again. She fell in love, not just with a man, but with herself. She opened an art and healing studio. She writes poetry now. And she says, "I thought I needed therapy. What I needed was place." Gemini places medicine. There are geographies where your soul contracts unlock, where your dormant talents rise to the surface, where what felt impossible in the old city becomes natural in the new. In these sacred places, miracles don't feel miraculous. They feel expected. Your body heals faster. Your thoughts clarify. Your prayers land quicker. Because everything is aligned. That's the kind of transformation we're talking about. Not a surface-level pivot. Not a temporary improvement. But a root-deep realignment that alters your very chemistry. And this shift won't just change you. It will ripple outward. Because when you change, everything connected to you must adapt. Old wounds you've been carrying, ancestral burdens, unhealed griefs, they'll begin to loosen. Your voice will deepen, not in tone, but in truth. You'll speak from a place of knowing, not performing. You'll move from a place of peace, not pressure. In this place, your purpose will find clarity, not through effort, through resonance. Suddenly, the things you struggled to force before will start happening effortlessly. The opportunities that once ignored you will now chase you. Why? Because you'll be vibrating at the frequency of your true calling. And yes, people will notice. Some will celebrate. Others will question. Let them. Because when you are living from alignment, validation becomes irrelevant. And the more you transform, the less you'll need to explain. You'll notice it in your body first. The pain that always clung to your shoulders will soften. Your sleep will deepen. Your dreams will return. You'll crave silence, nature, wholeness. Your body will stop bracing for the next disappointment because it will no longer be living in survival. It will be living in belonging. You'll notice it in your relationships too. Conversations will go deeper. Laughter will return. You'll draw in people who nourish you, not drain you. Those who reflect your light back to you, without distortion or competition. And most beautifully, you'll notice it in your soul. A softness, a reverence, a quiet joy that no circumstance can shake. You'll find yourself walking slower, listening longer, trusting deeper, because you will have stopped running from yourself. Gemini, this is not a fantasy. This is the destiny that's already in motion. The only question is whether you'll trust it enough to step forward. And if you do, oh, beloved one, what waits for you is not just a new life. It's the real you, rising, radiant, whole. Conclusion: you are the fulfillment of the calling. Gemini, take a breath right now. Not the kind that fills your lungs, but the kind that anchors your soul. Because everything you've just walked through in this message has not been theory, has not been metaphor, it's prophecy. And it's personal. You're not just hearing a beautiful idea. You are standing at the edge of a new dimension of your life, and the door is wide open. The universe, with divine precision, has aligned this moment to reach you now. Because deep inside, you know the truth. You were never meant to remain in a space that drains your spirit, dulls your gifts, or minimizes your essence. You were meant to be activated. And the activation begins when you say yes, not just with your words, but with your willingness to move. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. Every sign has been preparing you. Every restlessness, every unanswered prayer, every synchronicity and tug of intuition. The delays weren't punishments. They were grace making room for readiness. And now, you're ready. Gemini, you are not becoming someone else. You are finally returning to yourself. And the place you are being led to? It is sacred soil, yes. But more than that, it's where the divine has buried the blueprint for the life you've always dreamed of, but never believed you could have. This is your sacred relocation, not just in geography, but in identity. The version of you that breathes freely, creates boldly, loves deeply, and walks in purpose is waiting on the other side. But remember, the universe can only offer. You must choose. So choose boldly. Choose beautifully. Choose with the full weight of your spirit. And as you do, comment below, I'm ready to walk into my destined place. Let that declaration be your seal. Let it mark the moment you stopped waiting and started stepping. Your courage will be seen in heaven. Your movement will ripple into miracles. Now go, Gemini. Don't just wait for the sign. Be the sign.